Cops, those stalwart guardians of the peace, are sworn in to protect and serve the common citizens. Yet, amidst the chaos of the streets, a unique and often overlooked dilemma arises when officers find themselves tasked with apprehending their friends. This paradoxical scenario blurs the boundaries between professional obligation and personal allegiance, presenting law enforcement with a moral quandary unlike any other. Here are times when idiot police officers arrested their friends. Before we get into the main content of the video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to receive updates on our latest videos. Feel free to leave your comments with feedback on the content and any topics you're interested in. Your support means a lot to us. Have a great day. #1 Officer David Ramirez. Officer David Ramirez tightened his grip on his flashlight, squinting through the downpour. A dark figure, hunched and shivering, huddled in the mouth of a fire escape. "Police!" David barked, adrenaline surging through him. "Show me your hands!" The figure flinched, slowly raising trembling hands above their head. David approached cautiously, his heart thudding a frantic counterpoint to the rain. As he got closer, the figure's face swam into view. The blood drained from David's face. Mark Evans, David's best friend since childhood, stared back, eyes wide with disbelief. His once familiar face looked gaunt, shadowed by a scruffy beard. A damp, worn hoodie hung limply on his thin frame. "David!" Mark's voice was a croak. "What the hell is going on?" David's mind raced. They hadn't spoken in years, not since Mark's life had spiraled downward after his sister's death. He'd shut himself off, drowning his grief in cheap liquor and bad decisions. The last David knew, Mark had disappeared, leaving only rumors of gambling debts and shady dealings. But this... Seeing Mark huddled in an alley looking like a ghost of his former self was a gut punch. "You're under arrest for... David stumbled, his voice choked. He couldn't bring himself to say it. Suspected robbery. The tip had come anonymously, a grainy security footage from a nearby store showing a man vaguely resembling Mark. Mark's face crumpled. "Robbery? David, you gotta be kidding me. This is some kind of mistake, right?" David longed to believe him, to see the Mark he knew again, the one who used to crack jokes during stakeouts and always had his back. But suspicion gnawed at him. Was this a coincidence? "I wish it was, Mark," David said, his voice gruff. "But we gotta follow procedure." He clicked on his handcuffs, the metallic click a death knell to their friendship. Shame flooded David's veins as he watched the spark of betrayal flicker in Mark's eyes. At the station, the reality of the situation hit Mark harder than the cold metal bars of his holding cell. David, the guy he'd confided in about every scrape and secret growing up, was the one who put him here. He slumped against the cold concrete, a bitter chuckle escaping his lips. David, meanwhile, paced the interrogation room, frustration twisting his insides. The more he stared at the security footage, the more doubt gnawed at him. The figure in the hoodie was blurred, the image distorted by the camera's low quality. It could be anyone. He slammed the file shut. He needed to see Mark again. This time, not as a cop and a suspect, but as a friend trying to help a friend in need. "Mark," David said, pushing open the cell door. Mark looked up, his face a mask of anger. But there was a glimmer of something else in his eyes, a flicker of hope. "You believe me now?" Mark's voice was raw. David knelt before the cell. "I don't know what to believe anymore, buddy, but I know I want to help you." He explained the blurry footage, the doubt gnawing at him. Mark's initial anger morphed into relief. He confessed, not to robbery, but to the years of isolation, the descent into self-destruction. He spoke of his grief, his crippling guilt over his sister's death. David listened, his heart heavy. He saw a different Mark, broken but not beyond repair. "We can figure this out," David said, his voice firm. "But first, we gotta clear your name." The hours stretched into a frantic blur. David, fueled by caffeine and determination, retraced his steps. He interviewed the shopkeeper again, this time with a sharper eye. The man mentioned a distinctive tattoo on the robber's arm. a skull with a rose clenched in its teeth. Mark had no tattoos. They reviewed footage from nearby street cameras, finally spotting a better glimpse of the perpetrator fleeing the scene. This time, the skull and rose tattoo gleamed accusingly under a flickering streetlight. David felt a surge of relief, tinged with shame. He had almost thrown his best friend under the bus, blinded by suspicion and a by-the-book approach. He raced back to the station, a renewed fire in his gut. The captain wasn't thrilled. David's error had made the department look bad, but seeing the new footage, even he couldn't deny it, pointed away from Mark. David apologized profusely to Mark, his voice thick with regret. Mark's initial anger had melted away, replaced by a weary acceptance. "It's all right, David," Mark said with a tired sigh. "Just glad you figured it out." #2 Officer Doug Heffernan. Rain lashed against Officer Doug Heffernan's face, blurring the already grainy security footage on his phone. The flickering image showed a hooded figure, clad in a baggy sweatshirt that looked suspiciously like the one Mikey usually wore, breaking into Jimmy's bodega. Doug tapped his meaty finger against the screen, adrenaline pulsing. "Bingo," he muttered, feeling a surge of pride. Finally, something concrete on the string of petty thefts plaguing the neighborhood, and a chance to impress Captain Mallory. Doug had always felt a little dim compared to his childhood buddy Mikey. Mikey, with his quick wit and easy charm, had aced the bar exam, while Doug barely scraped by the police academy. Now, Mikey was a hotshot lawyer, while Doug patrolled the same monotonous beat. But tonight, the tables were turned. Doug, the bumbling cop, had finally cracked a case. He slammed open the back door of Mikey's apartment building. The stale air of old pizza boxes slapped him in the face. Mikey's door was ajar, light spilling out. Doug pushed through, gun drawn. Inside, Mikey sat hunched over his laptop in a t-shirt and jeans, a half-eaten bowl of cereal beside him. "Mikey! Don't move!" Doug bellowed, aiming the gun at his friend's head. Mikey, startled, almost choked on a Cheerio. "Doug, what the—" Fear morphed into disbelief as he took in Doug's crazed expression. "Dude, lower the weapon. It's me, Mikey." Doug squinted. The grainy security footage hadn't done Mikey's face any justice. He fumbled with his phone, bringing up the video. Panic bloomed in his chest as he recognized the telltale dent in Mikey's laptop, a coffee incident from their high school days. "Oh," Doug mumbled, holstering his gun with a sickening thud. "Right, it's, you look different in the dark." Mikey, still trembling, stood up. "Different in the dark? I look like me. Are you on something, Doug?" Shame burned Doug's cheeks. No, of course not, it's just, he stammered, his mind scrambling. "That bodega robbery. Looks like they got away with your hoodie." Mikey's face contorted in a mix of anger and amusement. "The what? Doug, the only robbery happening here is you stealing my breakfast." He pointed to the half-eaten cereal. Doug sank into the worn armchair, feeling like his badge should spontaneously combust. "Yeah, about that." He mumbled a halting explanation, his voice shrinking. By the time he finished, Mikey was doubled over, his laughter echoing in the small apartment. You thought I was a robber? Based on a grainy security video and my old hoodie?" Mikey wiped tears from his eyes. I just wanted to do good," Doug mumbled, a pathetic excuse even to his own ears. Mikey's laughter subsided, replaced by a weary sigh. "Doug, you've always been more heart than brains. Remember Mr. Henderson's prize-winning pumpkin you accidentally confiscated for suspicion of suspicious roundness?" Doug winced. That incident had become neighborhood lore. Mikey ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I appreciate the sentiment, but trust me, I'm not breaking into bodegas, especially Jimmy's. You know he throws the best bodega cat parties." Doug felt like hiding under the chair. "Cat parties? What are you even talking about?" Mikey launched into a detailed explanation of Jimmy's annual tradition of leaving out tuna cans for the neighborhood strays. Every year, around the holidays, Jimmy would set aside a hefty portion of his budget for a special occasion, the annual Bodega Cat Party. He'd stock up on cases of cheap tuna, the kind that came in cans adorned with swirling cartoon fish and bold promises of dolphin-free plastered across the label. The night before the party, Jimmy would meticulously arrange the cans on the sidewalk outside his store, creating a feline buffet fit for royalty, or at least for a bunch of stray alley cats. The ritual was always the same. As dusk settled, casting long shadows across the street, the first whiskered guest would appear, tentatively approaching the fishy feast. Then another and another, until a motley crew of felines had gathered, sniffing cautiously before diving into the tuna smorgasbord. Jimmy, perched on a milk crate behind the counter with a wide grin, would watch the furry feast unfold. He'd mutter encouraging words, "Go on, Mittens, don't be shy," or "Plenty for everyone there, Whiskers," as if the cats understood English. The whole scene was a bizarre, heartwarming spectacle, a testament to Jimmy's soft spot for strays. According to Mikey, these bodega cat parties were legendary. People would come from neighboring blocks just to witness the feline frenzy. Some even brought treats of their own, a can of fancy feast or a bag of catnip to contribute to the celebration. Shame gnawed at Doug. All this time, chasing ghosts while ignoring the obvious. His big break was a colossal misunderstanding fueled by his own tunnel vision. Later, as Mikey drove him back to the station, Doug apologized profusely. "I feel like an idiot," he confessed. "You are," Mikey said bluntly. "But hey, at least you didn't arrest a cat." Doug groaned. "Don't even joke about that." The silence that followed was heavy. Doug knew he'd tarnished not just his professional image, but their friendship. At the station, Captain Mallory glared at him over her desk. "Heffernan, what in the blue blazes were you thinking?" Doug hung his head, the captain's scathing words a familiar tune. But this time, he deserved them. As he shuffled out, he saw Mikey waiting near the exit. Mikey's face held a mix of concern and a hint of amusement. "So," he said, "cat party at Jimmy's this Saturday. You in?" Doug hesitated. The thought of facing Jimmy, the friendly bodega owner he'd practically accused of harboring a criminal, made him squirm. Yet the genuine worry in Mikey's eyes tugged at him. "Yeah," Doug mumbled, defeat heavy in his voice. "Maybe a peace offering is in order. Tuna, perhaps?" Mikey grinned, the familiar spark back in his eyes. "Good call. Jimmy might appreciate an apology more." Doug winced. Facing down a robber paled in comparison to facing the disappointment in his friend's eyes. "Yeah, about that." #3. Officer James Brown. James approached his two friends, huddled together on a park bench. Sarah and Michael, faces illuminated by the faint glow of their phones, looked up in surprise. "What are you guys doing out so late?" James forced a smile, his voice tight. "Just catching up, Jamie," Sarah said, tucking her phone away. Michael, ever the jokester, chimed in. "Yeah, reminiscing about the good old days when you weren't chasing us around with tickets for underage drinking." A hollow laugh escaped James's lips. The camaraderie felt strained, a stark contrast to their usual easy banter. He knew this encounter was a bad idea, a violation of protocol. But tonight, something felt off. He'd received an anonymous tip about a potential drug deal happening in the park after dark. The description vaguely matched Sarah and Michael, known troublemakers in their youth, but now seemingly on the straight and narrow. Was this a genuine lead, or something more sinister? James opted for caution. "Mind if I take a look at your bags?" Sarah and Michael exchanged a confused glance. "Seriously?" Michael scoffed. "Come on, we're practically family." But James saw the flicker of panic in Sarah's eyes, a fleeting movement he couldn't ignore. He reached for her bag, his hand trembling slightly. "Don't!" she hissed, her voice laced with a desperation that sent alarm bells ringing in his head. A struggle ensued, brief but intense. James managed to secure the bag, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He unzipped it with a sickening clunk, his worst fears confirmed. Nestled amongst Sarah's belongings was a small plastic bag filled with a white, powdery substance. Betrayal, raw and potent, slammed into him. These were his friends, people he'd known since childhood. Yet here they were, caught red-handed. James's loyalty to his badge, the oath he had sworn, warred with the loyalty to his friends. He wanted to believe it was all a mistake, a cruel misunderstanding. But the evidence sat there, a stark indictment. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as Michael hung his head in defeat. The silence between them was deafening, a chasm that widened with each passing second. James called for backup. The arrest was swift and brutal, the scene eerily surreal. As Sarah and Michael were hauled into the waiting police car, their eyes held a mixture of anger and despair that pierced James's soul. The following days were a blur of paperwork, court appearances, and strained conversations with his superiors. The media frenzy surrounding the case only amplified the growing pressure. James, once lauded for his dedication and community engagement, became a pariah within the force. He faced accusations of bias, whispers of a fabricated arrest. But the guilt was a constant companion. Every night, he relived the scene in the park, the look of betrayal etched on his friends' faces. He desperately wanted to reach out, to explain his predicament, but the professional boundaries held him back. The trial was a grueling ordeal. Sarah and Michael, represented by a relentless lawyer, maintained their innocence. The lack of a search warrant proved a hurdle for the prosecution, and James's hesitation during the arrest was scrutinized endlessly. In the end, the charges were dropped. Relief washed over James, laced with a bitter aftertaste. Sarah and Michael remained shrouded in secrecy, their lives irrevocably damaged by the arrest. They vanished from his life, leaving behind a void that no amount of justification could fill.